What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to America's Finest Sports. And also, this is being double broadcasted onto TTB Ravens Media as well. None of you got to see this, but we set a 30-second timer, and Matt still had some stuff to do. So he was running in the background as that 30-second timer was going down. It was pretty funny to watch. But overall, tonight, we're going to be talking with a heavy Ravens focus. And if you guys are coming from TTB, the goal, we want to try and hit 100 subs on AFS tonight. We're at around like 85, I want to say. So only about 15 subs needed to get there. But we're going to be having a heavy Ravens focus tonight. We're going to be talking about, obviously, we're going to start off with Lamar Jackson. Talk about his comeback player of the year potential, just the way that he's going to be able to come back into this offense. Then we're going to be talking about overall bounce back season teams, starting off with the Baltimore Ravens. And then finally, we're going to be talking about rookies that are in a position to succeed in that rookie year that people aren't talking about, highlighted by none other than Mr. Isaiah Likely. So heavy Ravens focus. We're really excited to be doing this tonight. But, starting off with Lamar Jackson, Matt, I know you're a huge Lamar Jackson fan, even though you're a 49ers fan. What are your kind of thoughts on Lamar Jackson coming into this year from a less biased perspective, I'll say, than myself?
So I'm very excited for this season just because we've heard a lot of Lamar Jackson slander this offseason. And basically, since he was hurt last year, just everything's very, very negative when it comes to Lamar Jackson. And we've seen Lamar Jackson on the field. Obviously, all of the Ravens fans, you guys are locked into it, but I'm a big Lamar fan, so I pretty much watch like almost all the Ravens games. He's been fantastic. This idea that he hasn't played well or that he was having a bad season last year is just not accurate whatsoever. So when I'm looking into this season, I remember that when Lamar was hurt last year, when he was hurt in the pocket, actually, let's emphasize that, the Ravens were the 1 seed. And Lamar Jackson was playing with basically Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, no offensive line. He had a tackle that couldn't block for maybe a second and a half in Villanueva. Just not a very good team around him. No running backs, literally practice squad running backs every single week, signing guys off the street. And he was still coming back and winning games when they were down 2-3 scores. It was a remarkable season up to that point. And a few weeks in, me and you talked about it, and we knew that it was not like a chance because Lamar had definitely his worst numbers, and he had thrown, like last year, he finished the year with 16 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, right? Not good numbers. But we were talking about it if you were looking at a true MVP early on in the season, because the interceptions happened later on too. Keep that in mind. But early on in the year, he was putting up fantastic numbers in terms of yards. He was one of the highest player in yards, and he was legitimately carrying the Ravens, who were in the number 1 spot. So he was a guy that was getting already disrespected last year. And now going into this year, he's in a prime spot to be a comeback player potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about last season and the numbers, they don't look amazing for him. But watching the Ravens, it was so clear that he had made a jump in his game. The way that he was throwing the ball, the way that he was commanding the offense, it was much improved from the previous years. And he won, the MVP 2 years prior to last season. And he was able to show that he could lead a team. And it wasn't, the defense was playing really well. Because in 2019, he led the team. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of the defense was making a lot of plays. We were getting Marcus Peters pick 6s in back-to-back weeks, I believe. Marlon Humphrey forced 7 or 9 fumbles. It was unbelievable. It just kept going. Everybody was working in full cylinder. It was working. The offense was working. He deserved that MVP. But last year, nothing was working. Not a single thing was working except for Lamar Jackson. And he would go out there. And Matt, we talk about this all the time. There are very few quarterbacks where you can be in a situation, maybe it's halftime or maybe it's the third quarter, and you say, hey, we need to score every possession to end this game to have a chance to win. And you give the ball to Lamar Jackson, and every possession you're going to score. That's what happened against the Indianapolis Colts. They were getting the brakes beat off of them, and Lamar Jackson just said, hey, I'm just going to start dotting everybody up. And I'm going to throw for 400 yards or whatever he ended up with. And I'm going to throw all these touchdowns to Mark Andrews and Hollywood, and we're going to win this football game. He put the team on his back like nobody else, honestly, in recent memory, in the NFL. Obviously, there's been great MVP seasons. Cam Newton, Patrick Mahomes. Last year, we had Aaron Rodgers. 2 years ago, Aaron Rodgers. There's been some great MVP seasons. But there hasn't been a player that every single week has been asked to do literally everything. He was the only player that could rush the ball. He was the only player that could throw the ball, and he didn't have pass catchers outside of Mark Andrews that could consistently catch the football. And he was still the number 1 seed. Like,
I was going to say the 3 games too. You're bringing up that, you score every single time. I can think of 3 off the top of my head. The Colts, the Raiders, and the Chiefs, where he literally had to do that. And then he did that. And I think all 3 of those games were on like nationally broadcasted games, like Monday night or Sunday night football. And that was early. Like, keep in mind, he only played 12 games. That's a quarter of his performances. And that's the ones I can just remember because they were such amazing performances.
Yeah. I mean, even think back to 2 years ago, Monday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns. Just goes out there. They had lost the lead because he had cramps or he had to go to the bathroom. We don't know exactly what. Comes back out. He's lost the lead, and he was like, all right, sorry, Baker. I know you got back into this game, but I'm going to score the ball every time, and we're going to win. Like,
dude, and like also like just like talking about him as a player, a lot of like the narratives were that like, oh, he didn't develop as a passer. He was worse as a passer since he was throwing more interceptions. But if you look at his actual numbers, he was very easily on pace to break any, like completely shatter any passing yards numbers he had before, because he had 3,100 in the MVP year and he already had 2,800 something. So he was going to put up a ton of passing yards. Now, his completion percentage was about the same as the year before, 64%, but that's solid. He's been at 64 to 66 for the past 3 seasons since his rookie year. So those are pretty good numbers there. We know
I want to say, take out the Hollywood Brown drops. He's throwing 90% completion percentage right there.
How many in that in the Tucker game, the one against the Lions? Oh my God, it was like 3 touchdowns that he dropped. He would have beat his yards record if Hollywood would have caught those passes.
Probably. I mean, and then when you look at him this year and coming back, and maybe it's a contract year. We don't know if he gets that extension done before the season starts, but the weapons that he has now are easily the best he's ever had in his career. He won the MVP with Hollywood, Willie Snead, and Seth Roberts. Those were his pass catchers. And he did have Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. And Hayden Hurst was I think the 5th leading pass catcher on that team. This year, the roster that he has, the guys he's throwing to, they have good hands and they can get open. And they can make plays in space. None of the players from that 2019 year could get open outside of Mark Andrews. They couldn't catch. And with the ball in the hands, they weren't very good.
Hollywood came in 2020, right?
He was 2019.
Okay, but he was a rookie. He was not quite.
Yeah, he was coming off the list, Frank.
Yeah. No, in this offense, I mean, like this year, like even though, and also that's another thing is like, I think a lot of people just don't think that the Ravens have like the receiving core to be able to do that, like to be able to hang with Lamar. I think that's kind of like a misconception going around the league right now. But if you look at the receiving core this year, it's better than what he's had to work with. Like really obviously, if you go back and you start comparing it to other teams, if you look at the offensive line, now not the offensive line when he was younger, maybe not quite there yet, but compared to last season, massive upgrades. And then you go to the run game, probably, I'm not gonna say it's better. I think probably the first the first couple years maybe, but like he has way better receiving core. It's like pretty much
JK is better than Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
And Mark Ingram was 2019. It was Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards, and now it's JK and Gus.
Yeah. And you guys had Seth Roberts. Yeah, you guys had Willie Snead. Come on, bro. Willie Snead, really? Willie Snead in what, 2020? That's ridiculous.
Oh, and I want to say this just because I think it was really funny. We had a comment on TTV that said, I can't believe we signed Demarcus Robinson. I'd much rather have Willie Snead.
No, you wouldn't. You definitely would not want that. You don't want Willie Snead. Willie Snead can't move. That's a problem. But yeah. I'm just interested in it. I wanted to see, in terms of his rushing numbers, how different were they? I want to see right now. I mean, not quite on the same level as previous seasons, but pretty much the same thing. Just not as many touchdowns. That's just because the offense wasn't that good. And they
Yeah.
didn't have running backs to run any type of zone options or read options or anything like that when they got in the red zone. I remember who was the running back at the beginning of the year? I had him on my fantasy team.
Last year,
Yeah,
well, there
we
was
were
a
hyped about
lot.
him. Yeah, we were
It
hyped
was
about him.
Tyshawn Williams,
Tyshawn
Nate
Williams.
McCrary.
Remember when he kept fumbling him? When Tyshawn Williams kept fumbling
Yeah, he kept
the zone reads and they
fumbling.
couldn't run it? Dude, come on, man. He didn't have anything to work with. But no, I'm pumped for Lamar because I feel like for the Ravens too, I think that their division's a little bit overrated. I do think that the North is. I think it's worse than you think it is. I don't think that any of the teams are bad, but Watson's gone for 11 games. So that's unless they go and sign a quarterback, come on. Like they're not going to be very good. Jacoby Brissett's going to be their quarterback. That's not ideal. Let's just put it that way.
Oh no, Josh Dobbs looked filthy in the preseason.
We know who Josh Dobbs is at this point. We know who Josh Dobbs is. You got Mitchell for the Steelers, and they got some great weapons. Pickens is getting a ton of hype. We saw Najee. We've seen Deontay emerge. We've seen all these guys emerge on the offense. I don't like Mitchell Trubisky at all. I think Kenny Pickett might start, but Kenny Pickett's also not that great either. So that's the other thing. And then you have a legit team in the Bengals. And also, I don't want to rip the Steelers too much because the Steelers defense is phenomenal. Like that's very clear. But then the Bengals defense is getting a little bit overrated, and they kind of got a nice run. But let's not go back and act like they were the second best team in the NFL because they were very obviously not. And if you don't have injuries last season, they're not the best team in the division, clearly. So
and they barely won the division. There was a 2-game difference between the Bengals and the Ravens last year, and the Ravens lost every game without Lamar Jackson. And the Bengals would not have made the playoffs as a wild card team. Ravens have Lamar Jackson. The Bengals don't make the playoffs, like very clearly. And I just think it's really funny that Bengals fans are like, "Oh no, we're so good," and it's like, okay. But you wouldn't have even been there if we hadn't had our quarterback get injured. And also, you got the most favorable postseason schedule I've ever seen in terms of matchups. Like, get to start off against, did they play the Raiders, then the Titans, I think it was? Like, no. They played the Raiders in the wild card round, and then they played the Titans because they had the first round bye.
Tannehill threw 4 picks.
It was horrible.
He was horrible. He couldn't hit.
And it was Derrick Henry's first game returning from a Jones fracture.
Yep.
And then they get the Chiefs, and it was like, okay, but the Chiefs are that is a bad matchup for the Chiefs. I mean, the Bengals are good. I'm not trying to take anything away. Like, they're good, but the matchups that they had were perfect for them. They get to play teams without, good pass rush. And their whole weakness was the offensive line. Then they get to the Super Bowl, and Aaron Donald in the second half just goes like, yeah, I feel like we're going to win this game. And basically ends that entire hope for Joe Burrow. But, let's talk about the Ravens team as a whole, because last year, obviously, last year was just so rough, losing so many players. And Miguel, we will get to Isaiah Likely. We got a lot to say about that, man. But overall, last year, losing your number 1 corner or your number 2 corner before the season starts in Marcus Peters. The same day you lose Gus Edwards. And I believe it was the same week they lost J.K. Dobbins. And then the next week they lose Justice Hill. Then they start they start the season. In week 1, Ronnie Stanley gets injured. You're like, oh, okay. So there goes our left tackle. There goes our entire running back core. There goes our number 2 corner. Lamar gets hurt in the season. Marlon Humphrey gets hurt in the season. And it just became an absolute. Hollywood's hurt every other week. Bateman got hurt in training camp, so he didn't play till like week 7 against the Chargers was his debut. And it was just unbelievably ruthless what happened to the Baltimore Ravens. And now everyone is coming back. J.K. Dobbins looks like he's going to be ready for week 1. We don't know about Gus Edwards. Marcus Peters has returned to practice. He's been activated off the PUP list. Lamar's back. This is a different team than what we saw last year. And for some reason, even though I think the roster may be better than it was in 2020 and 2019, people look at it like, the Ravens aren't that good. They haven't done anything recently. Well, yeah, they haven't done anything recently. Everybody on that team was hurt. I feel like when When Aaron Rodgers misses the whole year, they come back the next year and they're like, Packers going to win that division. Best team, like Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl contender right there. Why? Because it's Aaron Rodgers. Lamar Jackson misses the second half of last year, and everyone just starts going, I mean, like I saw Colin Cowherd, who claims he's a Lamar Jackson, like, oh, I've always been high on Lamar. And then you're watching him and he's like, I mean, I would rather have like Derek Carr. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? And I like Derek Carr. And he's like, I mean, when I look at it, like Justin Herbert just, he can just do so much more for your team. And, he's a winner. And you're like, so where's his playoff appearance if he's a winner? Like, what is this? Oh, Kyler Murray's just a winner right there. Where does that narrative come from? Everyone just pushes narratives on random people to make them seem better than Lamar Jackson. And then anytime Lamar Jackson disproves the narrative, they're like, that narrative doesn't count. We've got a new narrative. It's no longer that he can't throw the deep ball. Now it's, he can't win a playoff game. And then he wins a playoff game. And they're like, that was never a problem. He can't come from behind. Comes from behind like 3 times last year, double digits. And they're like, that was never a problem. Come on. What he can't do is he can't throw for 800 passing yards and rush for 37 touchdowns in a single game. Like, he just can't do that. I mean, I just don't want a player that can't do that. And he can't stay healthy, even though he's only missed. Like, that was the narrative that came out Sunday Night Football last night. Guy comes out and he's like, Lamar Jackson, if he could just figure out how to stay healthy. Kyler Murray is standing on the opposite sideline. Kyler Murray's problem is, man, he keeps missing games at the end of the year. Lamar Jackson missed 5 games. And it was all from one injury last season. That's it. Matt, how's the comeback looking for this year? The bounce back season for the Ravens?
Dude, I love the Ravens, and I wanted to see, just the first thing I wanted to look at was what are their odds to win the division. And they are the favorite. They are the favorite to win the North, but they're at plus 145. Last season, I just said this earlier. I need to emphasize how big of a deal this is. They were the number 1 seed until Lamar got hurt. You just brought up all of those injuries, and then we look at the team. Like, if I'm looking at the depth chart right now, you didn't have either of your corners because Marlon ended up going down. Calais Campbell went down too, and he was having a fantastic year. And then that was like the final one where it's like, dude, there's no one. There's literally no one left. And then Bateman eventually came back, and I guess Andrews was there. But dude, it was just injury after injury after injury. And now I'm looking at this team and the talent on this Ravens team, especially defensively, especially in like certain positions such as running back. Now you have JK, you have Gus coming back, but you also have, Mike Davis. Justice Hill is your like 4th, 5th string guy. Like, you're so much deeper there, where the Ravens' real problem that they had was that they weren't as effective running the football, and Greg Roman kind of got exposed because they could not run the football. Well, one, they have all their running backs back. They have Lamar back, right? They also, the offensive line is drastically improved. Is Ronnie Stanley going to start week 1?
That's the hope. There hasn't been any reported setbacks, but I'm thinking he'll start week 1. But
Okay.
He may start like week 2 or week 3.
Okay, but he's going to be there early. You got Morgan Moses. Jawan James. Is Jawan James likely going to be the swing tackle? So he would then start the year, right?
Potentially. It could be him, or it could be Daniel Falele, who's a 6'8", 340-pound dude out of Minnesota.
Oh, he's more of a project, though. They probably wouldn't. I doubt that he would start at least early in the year. But still, if that's like your 4th tackle and you're keeping extra tackle and he's kind of like inside depth.
They're likely going to keep 10 offensive linemen. That's the expectation. Wow. Is they will have a backup for every single position. And Patrick McCarry, who plays every offensive line position, is actually really good at tackle.
And he's your backup center too.
And he's your backup center. He can also play really good left guard, right guard, left. He's played every single position on the offensive line for the Ravens and played well. Yeah,
so that's great. I mean, and you look at the squad. We're going to talk more about the tight end position later, but you're going to run a 2 tight end set. So you're going to have Rashad Bateman, who's a legit wideout. I don't think people have really realized how good of a player he is. He was awesome at Minnesota. He was fantastic. So you have him. And then you're going to have either Duvernay or James Prochet or, DeMarcus Robinson or one of these fast guys on the other outside that's kind of just in the Greg Roman offense. He will consistently run clear out routes every single time. This fantastic idea. But okay, I won't get into too much into Greg Roman, but I don't know. It's very exciting when you look at who they're rolling out this year. Defensively, I do have a couple question marks. I don't really know what Peters is going to look like. They did definitely help the secondary, but you add Marcus Williams. Now that's a big thing, is because, like, all right, at least you're adding a guy like that. Patrick Queen, we'll see how he looks. He's had an up and down career, I'd say, to this point, but I felt like he was coming on at the end of last season, so let's see what he does. Takes some players a little bit to kind of get going to adjust the speed of the NFL, so maybe he's just a little bit of a late bloomer there, but
he's also one of the youngest players on the Ravens roster.
He's like,
I believe he's 23 years old or 24 years old, and he's in his third season. He's younger than Odafe Away.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But yeah, dude, I mean, I look at the Ravens team and they just look really good. Like, this is a playoff team, very clearly. The big thing is just health. But like you said, like, now you can look in and you can say, okay, some of these guys are getting a little bit older, but like, it's kind of hard to look at a season and go, all right, well, we're gonna have everyone get hurt. You're probably not gonna have that again. That was the same kind of deal that happened to the Niners in 2020. They come back from the Super Bowl, everyone gets hurt, literally everyone, your quarterback too, and guess what? They missed the playoffs. Next year they come back and then they go to the NFC Championship game with a pretty similar squad to what they had pre-injury. So like, it feels like very reminiscent of that. I'm trying to think, who was the other team in the league that had all the injuries last year?
It was the Titans, but they kept their quarterback.
So it was a little
they
bit
lost Derrick Henry. You know, they didn't have Julio. They had a lot of defensive injuries, but they still had their quarterback.
Yeah.
And AJ Brown.
And the Colts were kind of banged up early on in the year, but only at like some positions. But yeah, I mean, no one had injuries as bad as the Ravens. It was absurd how many injuries they had. So like you were saying, it's just a completely different squad. It's a playoff squad. You look at the team, you look at the talent, you look at what they've done to win in the past, run the football. And they're going to be able to run the football so much better than they were last season. And you also got, you got some sweet weapons that I think that people are going to get excited about as they see them, just because they're inexperienced. I haven't really seen Bateman on the field. Definitely haven't seen Likely on NFL regular season field. So like, you have other guys that are going to be legit playmakers for Lamar. And JK's back, which is big.
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Dobbins was the best rookie running back in the NFL, and I firmly believe that. I think he was better than Jonathan Taylor his rookie year. He came out, he averaged 6 yards per carry, led the NFL. He rushed for over 700 yards, and he really wasn't playing until the second half of the season. Like, he really came in and was like, this guy is our running back of the future. I had said after that year, I was like, I don't want to extend Gus Edwards because it doesn't make any sense, because J.K. Dobbins is that good to the point where we can say, hey, we can get an undrafted guy, like we got Gus Edwards as an undrafted player, to be the running back too and be that committee. But we ended up keeping Gus Edwards. So like, that running back duo right there is the best Lamar Jackson has ever had, and he's going to be able to run the football again. The Ravens went out and they drafted what many people have said, was the best center prospect in the last 10 years in Tyler Linderbaum, which center has been a problem that they've had. Kevin Zeitler was very solid last year. They bring in a right tackle. Like, the offensive line is so much better. Mark Andrews initially came out of Oklahoma, and it was like, okay, this is a pass catcher. This is a wide receiver playing tight end, right? That was the type of thing that he was compared to. It was not a blocker. Mark Andrews has become a top 5 blocking tight end as a starter in the NFL, because a lot of teams have, like, the guy that's technically an offensive tackle, but they're like, no, he's a tight end, and we just throw him out there. But Mark Andrews goes out there and he blocks people now, which is like, last year I was not expecting it, and I'm watching him and I'm like, when did Nick Boyle start wearing 89? Because Mark Andrews is like pancaking people, and there were many plays where, like, one-on-one against Trey Hendrickson, and he's just keeping him off, and he's just beating him in a one-on-one. And you're like, what? that shouldn't be happening with Mark Andrews. That's not his skill set. That's something you expect out of a Nick Boyle, a George Kittle, a true blocker. Then Mark Andrews all of a sudden was just like, yeah, I'm just going to work on that, and I'm going to get really good at it. So they've got a good blocking tight end. Demarcus Robinson, this is something I didn't know when we signed him. One of the highest graded run blocking wide receivers in the NFL.
Dude, I would have never guessed.
I would have never known that.
He's tiny.
And it's just like, they're like, oh yeah, super physical, and just goes out there and just mauls people. And it's like, what? So not only is he a big play threat, but if the Ravens run the ball with him on the field, he may start George Pickensing people. and just start throwing him on the ground and blocking for him. So overall, like this team is now built around Greg Roman's system, and it's going to, you know what? I hate Greg Roman's system, but it's built around the system. Last year, it and the system were in completely different trajectories, and they tried to merge, and it worked horribly. And the Ravens just couldn't succeed. But then Lamar Jackson was just like, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pull a rabbit out of my hat every single week and give us at least a shot at winning this football game. So, but overall, like the Ravens roster right now is, I mean, I've said this plenty of times. I think they're clearly a top 3 roster in the AFC. I think they're a clearly top 3 team in the AFC. They have a top 3 quarterback in the AFC. They probably have a top 3 defense in the AFC if things go as projected. But still, when you hear the national media talk about them, they're like, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs right now. Maybe a wild card. And it's like, this team went 8-3 with Lamar. Bounce back is just getting Lamar for 5 more games. What's Lamar's career win percentage? Oh, yeah, one of the highest ever. That's probably, he wins over 60% of his games, which would be 3 out of 5. Oh, wow, look at that. That's an 11-win team. Bengals don't make the playoffs. And look at that. Ravens get to play the Raiders in the first round in a revenge game, but instead of, going up against them with nobody, they at least have experienced running backs, which they eventually got. But no, that's not how it worked. Instead, it was, it's Tyler Huntley. And everyone was like, Tyler Huntley is so good. Look at the way he's leading this team, the way he loses every game. That's the difference between Tyler Huntley and Lamar. Tyler Huntley lost every game that he played last year after Lamar Jackson got hurt. Now, we did win a game. I believe it was against the Bears or the Vikings. I think it was against the Bears. But that was in the middle of the season, and that was the Bears. like, if you don't win that game, there's something to be said. But it was like, game comes down to the wire. Tyler Huntley, can he do it? Oh, no, he cannot. How many quarterbacks in the NFL are you taking over Lamar Jackson in a can he do it situation? Maybe 2 or 3 or 4.
Not many, that's for sure.
Like there's very few. Like, Mahomes, maybe Allen, Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Brady. I think those are the only ones that I would be like, okay, if you said that, I would take them over him. But I see people that they're like, nah, man, I'm taking Justin Herbert. And I'm like, okay, if Justin Herbert's on. If Justin Herbert's off, he's throwing a pick 6 in this must-win situation. That's how it works out. So the Ravens it's not even I don't even know if you can call it a bounce back. It's just like, hey, we're still here and we're still the team to beat. Because when Lamar got hurt, it was like everyone's looking at them and they're like, this is the best team in the AFC. But then he gets hurt and they're like, nah, that team sucked. It's like, yeah, the roster sucked. The games didn't look pretty at all. Lamar Jackson just carried them. And now he actually has people around him. So definitely a bounce back candidate.